Gunshots ripped through the air, jolting Jason Bourne awake. Another nightmare. He was on the run again, drifting from one corner of the world to the next, scraping by in underground fight clubs. A hulking brute sneered across the ring. The crowd roared, their money on the muscle. But the fight was over before it began. One brutal punch from Bourne, and his opponent crumpled. The easy victory brought no satisfaction. Bourne's hyper-awareness picked up on a man watching him, a look of recognition in his eyes. This place wasn't safe anymore. The weathered man was Jason Bourne, a former top CIA operative gone rogue. His temples streaked with gray. He stumbled into a deserted alley, his breath ragged. He wasn't the young agent who shook the CIA a decade ago. Now, all Bourne wanted was peace, a quiet life. But for a man like him, tranquility was a luxury he couldn't afford. Even if he liked it, they wouldn't let him have it. As Bourne was on the run, a woman entered a warehouse in Iceland. Inside, servers and computers hummed, the lair of a group of young European hackers. The woman found a seat, opened her laptop, and began infiltrating the CIA's mainframe. This was Nikki Parsons, the agent who'd gone rogue with Bourne a decade earlier. Nikki uncovered all sorts of buried secrets, including files on Operation Treadstone, the program that had destroyed Bourne's life. Digging deeper, she discovered Treadstone's founder, Richard Webb, Bourne's father. The revelation was a bombshell. But as Nikki reeled from the shock, alarms were already going off at CIA headquarters in Langley. They knew they had a breach. Heather Lee, the CIA's sharp and ambitious cyber ops division head, quickly pinpointed the hacker's location, the warehouse in Iceland. To stop the intruder from downloading more data, Heather remotely triggered the building's kill switch, plunging the entire server room into darkness. Nikki knew she'd been made. She yanked out the USB drive, not forgetting to splash her whiskey over the laptop she'd been using, and set it on fire, destroying the evidence. But Heather had already traced the intrusion back to Nikki Parsons, the rogue CIA agent. And Nikki's file was connected to a name that was practically forbidden inside the CIA, Jason Bourne. Heather immediately reported the breach to the CIA director, Robert Dewey. Robert initially dismissed the incident as a minor nuisance, but the moment he heard the name Bourne, his demeanor changed. He decided it was time to eliminate this lingering threat once and for all. Heather seized the opportunity, requesting command of the operation. She revealed that Nikki had entered Greece, spotted on surveillance cameras at Athens Customs. What's more, before the power cut, Heather had managed to install a tracker on Nikki's USB drive. If Nikki used it, they could pinpoint her location, and possibly even snag Bourne. Robert saw the hunger for power and ambition in the young woman's eyes. But the chance to catch Bourne was too tempting to pass up, so he granted Heather full control of the operation. Despite his outwardly calm and supportive demeanor, Robert had his agenda. He contacted his most trusted assassin, known only as a Set, who was already on a clandestine mission in Rome. Just like a top-tier agent like Bourne, the Asset jumped at the chance to take the mission in Athens, Greece, the second they heard the name. Jason Bourne had no idea the quiet life he'd carved out for himself was about to be shattered. The last few years hadn't been easy. Drifting from place to place, scratching out a living in bare-knuckle boxing matches, he was constantly bruised and battered. He didn't know a storm of violence was brewing, ready to drag him back into the fight. In a fight, Bourne spotted a familiar face in the crowd. He was supposed to throw the match, but something about that face made him change his mind. He finished his opponent quickly and decisively. Back in the locker room, he found a note tucked into his bag. Nikki. Meet her in Syntagma Square, Athens, in 1 hour. Former spies on the run need to be extra careful about meeting up, to avoid being tracked. The CIA started watching Nikki. They're controlling all the security cameras in Athens. Nikki chose Syntagma Square as the meeting spot because the massive protests over the debt crisis are causing a huge scene, perfect for hiding in the crowd and avoiding being seen. The square's a war zone. Protesters and riot police are going at it. Chaos everywhere. But Nikki's not even looking. She's lost in thought. Until she turns and sees him. The man she's been dreaming of. Bourne. He's here. Nikki opens her mouth to speak, but Bourne cuts her off, pulling her into the surging crowd. Every second they stay put is a risk. Back at CIA headquarters, Heather Lee spots Nikki's distinctive hair on a surveillance monitor. She immediately alerts a tactical team to go make the arrest. As they run, Nikki tells Bourne that while working with a hacker named Christian DeSalle to expose the CIA, she uncovered a ton of classified documents about their secret operations. She found a new program, even more dangerous than anything they've done before, called Iron Hand. But Bourne says he doesn't care. He's done with the CIA. All he wants is to live in peace. With no other choice, Nikki reveals her real reason for finding Bourne. She discovered his father's name in the Treadstone files. Everything is connected to him. She insists he needs to see these documents. Just then, Bourne spotted the CIA agents closing in. He grabbed Nikki and pulled her away fast. On the big screen, everyone saw Bourne's face, caught on the agents' cameras. The legend was back. To shake them off, Bourne told Nikki to meet him at the Athena statue, and they split up. He'll handle the pursuers. CIA Director Robert orders everyone to stay on Bourne and authorizes deadly force. Agents draw their weapons and give chase. Suddenly, Bourne ambushes two agents inside a crowded train car. He's picking his battles, using the tight space to his advantage against the overwhelming numbers. In a blink, Bourne took down two agents. But the fight attracted the attention of the Athens tactical unit. He quickly disappeared into the chaotic crowd, shoving a motorcycle cop to the ground, grabbing the bike, and speeding off. A swarm of cops was hot on his tail, and right in front of him, a high-pressure water truck was being used by protesters. When Bourne showed up, the protesters let him pass. But then they started throwing water at the police officers behind him, sending them tumbling. Meanwhile, the CIA headquarters had already pinpointed Bourne's location and sent the asset to meet him. He sped towards his target. Nikki was waiting under the statue of Athena, but the second CIA team was already surrounding the bridge. Just as things were about to get bad, Bourne showed up, taking down the second team. Then he picked up Nikki and they escaped. Just then, a silver 5-gen Volkswagen Golf GTI zoomed in. Asset arrived, realizing he was facing a tough opponent. Bourne, knowing he had to get out of there, sped off in his car. Asset slammed on the gas and gave chase, the two cars tearing through the smoky streets of Athens. Heather Lee used the police traffic data and satellite imagery to track Bourne's movements. With the help of cutting-edge technology, the route of their chase was visible. While Bourne's car was perfect for navigating the narrow streets, Heather's intel and coordination allowed Asset to anticipate traffic and keep a close eye on Bourne. Seeing the main road completely blocked, Bourne suddenly veered onto a narrow stairway. Asset, caught off guard, slammed his vehicle into the wall. As he got out, weapon raised, Bourne's car burst out from the bottom of the stairs. Asset immediately switched tactics. With Heather's help, he located a vantage point. Racing to a rooftop balcony, he ruthlessly shot a civilian already there, securing his sniper's nest. He shouldered his Scar H, the designated marksman rifle variant, and aimed. Heather told Asset that Bourne would be passing by in 11 hours. Sure enough, soon after, Asset's scope showed Bourne gliding through the thick smoke. A gunshot rang out. Bourne and Nikki went down. Nikki sprawled on the ground, shot. Heather was completely visible in Asset's scope, while Bourne crashed behind the car, hidden from Asset's sight. The Athens Special Forces stormed the building where Asset was hiding because a helicopter spotted 3 bodies on the roof. Heather ordered Asset to retreat immediately. But Asset was determined to kill Bourne, so he refused, still glued to Nikki's position. He believed Bourne would come to save her. Bourne desperately wanted to save Nikki, but she knew the danger. She frantically tried to stop him. Just as Bourne was about to make a break for it, Nikki, with a final surge of strength, turned her body and took Asset's bullet. She sacrificed herself to save him. This foolish woman, she's been head over heels for Bourne since the 3rd movie. For 10 years, all she's seen is his figure. Bourne's probably like a shooting star, because every woman who falls for him ends up dead right in front of him. And here's the thing, Bourne's got this key, the one Nikki gave him, right before he died. It's very important, I bet. On the other roof, when the special ops team stormed in, Asset was long gone. On the freezing streets of Athens, all that's left is Nikki's body, all alone. Later, Heather Lee confronted CIA Director Robert, demanding answers. Why did Asset hate Bourne so much? Is there some deep-seated grudge between them that nobody knows about? In the post that told her the answer, it turns out Asset was a Blackbriar operative. He was undercover in Syria because Bourne exposed the whole operation. That messed things up big time, and Asset got caught and tortured. The CIA spent 2 years trying to get him out. So, Jason Bourne is now officially on the enemy list. Bourne used the logo on the key to find the locker in the subway. Inside locker #17 was a Heckler USP 9mm pistol, a gift from Nikki for self-defense. Bourne wasn't a fan of guns, but he kept the pistol close. Then he saw a metal box. Inside was a coded USB drive. This was the data Nikki wanted Bourne to see. Bourne also found a red notebook. Nikki wrote that Treadstone had been upgraded to Iron Hand, and all the plans were connected to Bourne's dad, Richard Webb. On the last page, Nikki wrote that Bourne was always being watched. And next to that, Bourne saw the address of hacker Christian de Sol, who Nikki mentioned in Berlin. That's where Bourne was headed next. At the same time in Washington, Aaron Kalour, the guy who built the biggest social media platform in the US, is giving a super passionate speech. He's talking about his company, Deep Dream, which has 1.5 billion users worldwide. He boldly declared to his followers that the Deep Dream promises to keep everyone's privacy safe, saying no one will be watched. His speech was met with thunderous applause and cheers from the crowd, but little did they know, this beloved young CEO had a secret meeting lined up. Right after his inspiring words, he slipped away to a quiet restaurant to meet with Robert, the head of the CIA. Turns out, all those heartfelt speeches were just a carefully crafted lie. Turns out, Deep Dream wasn't just some cool AI. It was a total spy tool for the CIA. They've been snooping on users' data without any limits, tracking the personal info of 1.5 billion people. This whole thing is called Operation Iron Hand, and Nikki spilled the beans to Bourne. Aaron Kalour, the guy who created Deep Dream, heard whispers that someone had hacked into the CIA and downloaded top-secret files. If Operation Iron Hand got exposed, Deep Dream would be toast. Aaron didn't want to be part of selling people's data to the government anymore, so he tried to ditch Robert, the CIA bigwig. But Robert's a seasoned player. He wouldn't back down that easily. He threatened Aaron, saying it was all about national security, and then vanished. This old fox treated the CEO like a kid. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Germany, a young man in a hoodie walks back into his apartment. As soon as he steps inside, something feels off. It looks like someone's been rummaging through his stuff. And then Bourne appears right behind him. This bald guy is de Sol, the hacker Nikki mentioned. De Sol's no dummy. He instantly recognizes the legendary Jason Bourne. Bourne doesn't waste time. He hands de Sol a heavily encrypted USB drive that Nikki left for Jisoo and tells him to decrypt it. The tracking virus Heather Lee had planted immediately pinged. She quickly pinpointed the USB's location and rushed to inform Robert. Bourne was back. Robert's reaction was almost giddy. He immediately dispatched an asset team, stationed in Germany, to the target location. Heather noticed Robert's eagerness. Perhaps Bourne wasn't targeting the CIA. Maybe he just wanted answers about his past. But Robert seemed to be hiding something, some secret related to Bourne, and wasn't taking any chances. Heather's suspicions about Robert began to grow. De Sol had decrypted the files for Bourne. While Bourne reviewed the contents, de Sol tried to recruit him. He urged Bourne to join his cause, like Nikki, to become an ally and help expose government corruption. But Bourne only wanted the truth. He wasn't interested in disrupting the status quo. He flatly refused de Sol's offer. De Sol's face darkened, and Bourne made a horrifying discovery. His father, Richard Webb, was the mastermind behind Operation Treadstone. The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. He couldn't believe it. But digging deeper, Bourne found a photo in the files, a picture of him with his father, taken right before he joined the Treadstone campaign. Bourne's mind flashed back to that meeting. His father seemed troubled, like he was holding something back. He had to go to Washington for some important business. Bourne would never forget the day his father vanished. A car explosion. He saw it all. His dad was gone. While Bourne was lost in painful memories, de Sol suddenly attacked him. De Sol swung a metal bar at Bourne. Using his bare hands, Bourne snatched the bar and quickly broke a chair leg, turning it into a weapon to take de Sol down. Everything happening inside the room was displayed on a large screen at CIA headquarters. Heather Lee had commandeered every camera feed in that Berlin neighborhood. She'd even remotely accessed de Sol's phone inside the room and was attempting to wipe the encrypted data. Bourne was viewing. Bourne was slowly digging deeper into the files, when suddenly, the computer screen went black. Heather Lee had wiped the data clean. Just as Bourne was about to leave, the phone on the desk rang out of the blue. It was Robert, who had instructed Heather Lee to call this number directly. This was the first time Robert ever spoke to Bourne face to face. He told Bourne that his father was a patriot, his death a sacrifice for America. So, Robert pleaded with Bourne to stop, to call off whatever he was doing, and cease any actions that could harm the CIA. Robert's voice was smooth, almost sincere, but it was all a lie. He was stalling, buying time for his team to get there. Heather Lee saw right through him. She knew Robert was up to no good. While Robert wasn't looking, she snatched his phone and sent a message to Bourne. Bourne hesitated, but the text warned him the strike team was on its way. Only 2 minutes left, Bourne bolted from the room. As the agents raced up the stairs, Bourne slipped away on the elevator's metal panel. The capture mission was a bust. Robert glared at Heather Lee, suspicion clouding his eyes. He couldn't shake the feeling she was playing him, but he had no proof. Even though Bourne had vanished, the CIA had analyzed the last file he accessed, a man named Smith, currently in London, who had been part of the Treadstone program. It was a safe bet Bourne would seek him out, desperate for answers about his father's death. Robert immediately wanted to send Asset to London to take Bourne out, but Heather Lee flatly refused. Robert stared at her, disbelief etched on his face. He couldn't believe she dared defy him in front of everyone. Heather Lee did what she did because a high-ranking senator was also there. This senator wanted to hear Heather's thoughts. Heather thought Bourne didn't have to die. She believed that if they could bring him back to the CIA, he'd be more valuable than dead. Heather thought she could talk to Bourne, maybe convince him to change his mind and come back to the CIA. The senator thought this idea wasn't bad. Robert's face went thunderous. He never expected the young woman he'd been trying to mold would turn on him right in front of everyone. From that moment, Robert made up his mind. He was going to kill Heather Lee. Bourne had already boarded the train to London. A message popped up on his phone, and he knew something was fishy. It seemed like there was a big fight going on inside the CIA. Bourne immediately started digging online. He found Heather Lee's file. He realized why Heather joined the CIA. She wanted to make real changes. He thought working with her might be a shortcut to getting things done. In London, Smith was running the show now, but a weird call came in. Bourne just called him out, saying he wanted to meet up. He told Smith to meet him in the square in 15 minutes. Smith was about to say no, but Bourne just hung up. Smith was freaking out, totally clueless that Bourne was watching him from the roof next door. Bourne also realized the whole square was locked down by CIA agents. Heather Lee got the intel and was heading to the square. She was going to try to get close to Bourne and have a straight-up chat with him. She gave Asset a tracking device and told him to wait outside the square, no messing around. All right, now she's boss. The Asset doesn't care about this young lady. He's just following orders from Robert. At this time, Smith stepped out of the building, ready to meet up. All the CIA guys were tailing him from a distance, except for Asset. Asset secretly messaged Robert on a burner phone and tossed the tracking device. Heather Lee gave him into the trash. He still wanted to kill Bourne. Robert just smirked. The special ops team Heather Lee sent to watch over Smith just followed him into a side alley, and Asset jumped out from behind and took him down. Losing contact with her first team, Heather Lee scrambled to deploy a second surveillance unit. They too were eliminated, taken out from behind by Asset. Now all of Heather's field agents were down, leaving Heather Lee with no operative forces. Robert conveniently pinned their deaths on Bourne, claiming Heather had completely lost control of the situation. He authorized Asset to take out Bourne directly. Heather knew this was all part of Robert and Asset's plan. While still trying to regain control of the situation, she urgently ordered her driver to bring the command vehicle to Alexanderplatz. Asset, ever the assassin, set up another sniper's nest on a nearby rooftop. His Scar H trained on Smith, who had just arrived at the square. He would take the shot as soon as Bourne appeared. But Bourne was prepared. He triggered a device, setting off every fire alarm in the surrounding buildings. People poured out into the square, creating chaos. The plaza, just moments ago empty, was now teeming with people. Smith, growing increasingly panicked, turned and bolted through the crowd. Bourne, hot on his heels, caught up with him. Using the chaos of the throng as cover, Bourne swiftly whisked Smith away. Asset, watching from his vantage point, saw Bourne take Smith to a secluded area. There, Bourne grilled Smith, bombarding him with questions. Why did his father create Treadstone? Why was he under surveillance? Why did his father die? Robert had secretly given Smith a small listening device and told him not to say anything to Bourne. When Smith stayed completely silent, Bourne pulled him to the edge of the balcony, and Smith screamed in terror. Asset frantically searched the lower levels, hearing the scream and rushing upstairs. Bourne was consumed by the mystery of his father's creation of Treadstone and the sudden, inexplicable death right in front of him. He didn't even know who killed his father. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Smith confessed. His father died because of Bourne. Turns out, his father only authorized the Treadstone program. He wasn't involved in any operations. And the very first Treadstone recruit was Bourne himself. Knowing this, Richard Webb, Bourne's father, planned to go to Washington, expose the truth to the White House, and hopefully get Bourne freed. Fearing exposure, Robert sent Asset to assassinate Bourne's father. Robert and Asset are the killers. The reason Robert is so determined to eliminate Bourne. At this time, Asset arrived, gun raised, aiming at Bourne. To escape, Bourne leaped from the building. He landed hard, unconscious. By the time Asset scrambled through the crowd, Bourne was gone. Just as Bourne was about to leave, he saw Heather Lee's command vehicle approaching. He smashed the windshield and jumped in. Heather Lee was planning to find Bourne to talk, but Bourne beat her to it. As soon as Bourne got into the car, he asked where Robert was. Heather Lee told him Robert was in Las Vegas, attending the 2016 Deep Dream Developers Conference with the CEO. Knowing Robert's schedule, Bourne was about to leave, but Heather Lee gave him a phone, wanting to stay in touch. Bourne didn't understand why. Heather Lee explained that they had the same goal, to kill Robert. And so, a small alliance against Robert was formed. Robert checked into the developer conference hotel in Vegas. His room was up on a high floor. He called Asset and told him to come to the conference to take care of Aaron Kalor, the Deep Dream CEO, who's been a pain in the neck, and Heather Lee, the traitor. But neither of them knew Bourne was in town too, setting up a meeting with Heather Lee at the hotel casino. While Heather wasn't looking, Bourne slipped a tracking device into her purse. But he wasn't tracking Heather. He texted her to plant the tracker in Robert's bag instead. When Robert and Heather Lee met, they acted friendly. Robert seemed nice and sweet, and Heather fell for it. Heather had no idea Robert was planning to get rid of her. She agreed to her boss's request and, before going on stage, secretly slipped a tracking device into Robert's pocket. At this time, Asset raced to a high point in the hall, selecting a vent overlooking the stage. He pulled out his sniper rifle. Aaron Kalor, scheduled to speak later, suddenly decided to go up on stage now. It turned out he'd been planning this for a long time, using the conference as a platform to expose the CIA's oppression of the Deep Dream platform. Seeing that the Iron Hand operation was about to be exposed, Robert frantically called Asset, ordering him to eliminate Aaron Kalor and Heather Lee immediately. Meanwhile, Bourne, listening in on the tracking device, overheard the order. He immediately burst into the hall and spotted the vent, the perfect sniper position. Bourne shone his flashlight on the vent. Asset, about to fire, was blinded by the light and mist, hitting Aaron Kalor in the shoulder. Chaos erupted in the hall. Bourne fired a rapid burst at the vent, hitting Asset in the shoulder. CIA agents were getting ready to escort Robert out, but he did something strange. He wanted to go back upstairs to his room. It seemed like he'd anticipated the outcome. Robert was taken back to his room, and he ordered all the bodyguards to leave. Bourne dodged the pursuing agents and raced to the elevator. He arrived at Robert's room, kicked the door down, and confronted him. Robert was waiting. The two finally met. Robert seemed to know Bourne intimately, telling him that during the Treadstone program, he'd killed 32 people. He framed each one as a contribution to American national security. He argued that Bourne had wandered too long, and it was time to come home, but Bourne couldn't return to the CIA. He wouldn't work for the enemy who killed his father. At this moment, Robert's top lieutenant stormed in. Bourne shot and killed him, but was hit himself. Robert aimed his gun at Bourne's head. Bang! Robert fell. The shooter was Heather. Bourne grabbed her gun and told her to leave immediately. Bourne was about to leave, but Heather knew where he was going. She knew he was going to find the real enemy who killed his father. Asset made his way out of the hotel, gunned down a SWAT officer, and stole a heavily armored Lenco Bearcat. This monster truck had a powerful 6.7-liter turbo diesel engine. Its 0.5-inch thick military-grade steel body could withstand 0.5 caliber machine gun fire. It was a purpose-built troop carrier that looked like a tiny tank barreling down the streets. Seeing Asset drive off, Bourne swiped a black Dodge Challenger and gave chase. It had a powerful 5.7-liter Hemi 5.8 engine, capable of 381 horsepower. This is a car you might recognize from the Fast and Furious movies. Spotting Bourne, Asset slammed the gas and plowed into a line of stopped traffic, a real street racer and killer. Bourne gave chase, a brutal pursuit, and finally leaped onto the top of the armored vehicle. Asset, in a desperate maneuver, drove straight into the casino. The car came to a halt in the main lobby, and Asset scrambled into the underground tunnel. Suddenly, Bourne lunged at him. Two of the CIA's top agents clashed in a final, brutal fight. Each carried a deep-seated hatred for the other. Asset blamed Bourne for betraying the organization, for the horrific torture he endured for 2 years. Bourne blamed Asset for killing his father. The fight was vicious, leaving both men badly injured. Asset grabbed a rope, choking Bourne, determined to kill him. "You're a traitor, it's in your blood," he snarled. Bourne wrestled, throwing Asset to the ground, pinning him, and snapping his neck. Bourne dispatched another enemy, vanishing into the shadows once more. Heather Lee hopped into the senator's car. The CIA was in disarray. Heather pitched to the senator that when considering candidates for director, they should consider her. Plus, she'd bring Jason Bourne, the CIA's biggest headache, back into the fold. After all, they'd worked together before. If they couldn't get Bourne back, she wouldn't hesitate to eliminate him. Heather Lee got out of the car, turned and walked into the park. She had a meeting with Bourne here. She brought a memento from Bourne's father, hoping to persuade him to return to the CIA. With his enemies gone, she hoped he could return to serving America. Impressed by Heather Lee's genuine plea, Bourne didn't immediately agree, but he will consider her request. Heather returned to her car and, to her astonishment, found a phone on the passenger seat. The phone contained an audio recording of her conversation with the senator. This is the final Bourne movie, and the first new one starring Matt Damon in 10 years, since the third film. While it took a while to get here, the brutal fights and nail-biting chases show Jason Bourne is back. Join me as we follow the world's most skilled agent on a thrilling quest for the truth. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. What did you think? Let me know in the comments below.